What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the show. Today we have another Q&A episode, so thank you to everybody who asked a question. Quick housekeeping, pretty cool update coming to the group program. I will now be offering a single product, and I say now, within the next month, we will go through this transition where I will only be selling a single product, and that single product gives you access to both the home and the gym groups simultaneously. So if you're someone who toggles between them within the week, sometimes you're at home, sometimes the gym, this is going to work really great for you. If you're somebody who, I'm at the gym for a few months, but occasionally, I have a couple weeks where life is really busy and I want to stay home, this, again, can be really great. Instead of having to leave the gym group and join the home group, you have access to both simultaneously. Additionally, if I ever decide I want to make more groups, more teams with more goals, maybe a hybrid program where it's running and lifting, or the ultimate health program where it's a program that maybe spans across just lifting to running, to plyometrics, to mobility work, whatever, this is a product that I can just add to. And so if you join this, you would get access to all of the groups that I offer, and you can toggle between them. If I ever wanted to do an ultimate minimalist program where it's like the absolute least you could train and get benefit, again, it will all be under one roof, which I think is really, really helpful for the consumer, and it's helpful for me as well. There are some reasons why I didn't offer this until now. There's been some stuff with Train Heroic where the way they were offering this prior, I didn't think it was very user-friendly. I thought it was going to be quite confusing for the user. And so they've recently changed the fact that they now offer it in a way that I think makes a lot of sense for both me and the user. And so I'll be doing that in the next month. It will take some time. I have to update, all the boring BS in the back end, the mailing stuff, the emailing stuff, the introduction stuff, some of the videos. I got to update all that. So I'm working on that right now as we speak. But hopefully in the next month, you'll see a lot of this on social media. I'll be talking about it as an all-access group or a bundle, or I'm not really necessarily sure what I'll call it. So let's get into some of these questions. Let me pull up this first one. Let's scroll down. We'll go for about a half hour. You guys know the drill. First question, why is adding reps considered progressive overload and adding sets isn't? Well, so progressive overload is essentially the idea that when you train, you get stronger. We'll use the word stronger. When you train, you get stronger. So you get stronger because the training itself was challenging, right? So you need the training to be challenging, so challenging that it tells your body to adapt. But as you get stronger, those sets that you're doing that were once challenging enough are no longer challenging enough. I mean, that makes sense, right? I mean, if you've been lifting for, 5 years, and you go back to what you were doing on day one with the weights and the reps that you were using on day one, it's no longer challenging enough for you to get stronger, right? As you get stronger, you need the workouts to get harder so that they are still challenging from where you are now, which is a stronger person. Adding sets really doesn't do that, right? If you think about it, you can't just keep adding sets. It's like, I'm stronger now, I can do an extra set. That's not necessarily how it works. There's some nuance here. I mean, you can say that the more you train, you gain some work capacity and you can handle more sets. That's possible. I don't think that scales though. And we're going to get off into a rabbit hole there. But the truth is, progressive overload is a reaction, right, to getting stronger. It's not necessarily a proactive thing. I know in my group, and listen, in a lot of programs that are done logically, you are proactive with your pursuit of progression, but that's not necessarily how progressive overload really works. Progressive overload is a reaction to getting stronger. I am stronger now, such that now I need to make these sets harder so that they're still hard enough to make my new stronger self grow. And so in order to do that, you have to add reps or weight. Like, I need the single set to be really hard, right? I need that single set to be hard enough to really push my body to grow. Adding an additional set it adds volume totally, and it might make the overall workout, quote unquote, harder because you're doing more work, but it's not exactly progressive overload. Now, it would be progressive overload if your goal was to do more sets. If your goal was what we would call like work capacity, which is like your ability to survive more work, right? Then it would be progressive overload, where you're like, hey, like, I'm trying to be able to do more work. So as I can handle X, I can maybe handle X plus one more set. But that's not our goal when it comes to resistance training. Your goal is not to be able to handle more sets. Your goal is to gain muscle and strength. And the way that you do that is you focus on making the individual sets themselves harder by adding reps and weight over time as you get stronger. That doesn't mean adding sets is never a thing you can do. I would say personally, it's not something I ever do. I don't ever add sets within a training cycle. Now that you can do that. That's not like there are people who preach that, people who do that, and I'm sure they get just fine results. Totally. It's not my preferred method. I think it is too big of a jump in stimulus if you're trying to add reps and weight and sets. It's exponential at that point. I think it's too much. And if you have an amount of sets that really works, I don't think you need to do much more than that to make gains across a cycle. So I don't think that the amount of sets that you're doing in week 1 are all of a sudden incredibly inefficient by week 3, 4, or 5, provided you've tried to add more reps and weight. And so I'm not a big fan of adding sets within a cycle. I think it increases the stimulus and stress exponentially if you're also trying to add reps and weight. I don't think it's an impossible thing. I think if you're like, hey, these workouts are really short, I feel like I have way more in me and I'd like to see if I can add more volume, absolutely fine. You know, you could wait till next program and just reset with a slightly higher volume, or you could add within a program. I think that is fine. I would make a distinction that adding reps and weight are progressive overload because they are things you do in response to getting stronger such that your sets are still effective and challenging given your new gains in strength. And adding sets would be an addition of volume. And the question of when and why you would do that is a longer one for another day. Next question. Planning a cut, and I know I should lift the same, but what about cardio? Currently doing 2 days of rowing as listed in your programming. Continue as is or pull it out and add back as needed. Any advice? I like changing, next to as little as possible about your training, depending on if you're in a cut and maintenance and a surplus, whatever. Specifically when it comes to movement, I really don't love the idea of jacking up your cardio in an attempt to create a deficit. What I'd rather somebody focus on with their, let's call it movement across the week, is doing an amount of movement that they feel is really sustainable for the really long term, and just modifying the nutrition side. Once you start modifying the nutrition and the cardio, when it comes time to transition to maintenance for the very long term, you have to work on both of those variables again. You have to decrease the cardio back to what you feel is really sustainable. You have to, increase calories, and you're moving two things, in my opinion, that, I'd rather see somebody work on their weekly movement habits to get to a place that they feel is really enjoyable and sustainable, and not jack that up in an attempt to lose weight. Now, if somebody is sedentary, going into a deficit, and also wants to move more, I think that's fine. But I think that most people asking this question are like, you're already doing 2 days of rowing. If you were getting 8,000 to 10,000 steps per day, I would just leave it as is. I don't love the idea of like, oh, I'm going to do way more cardio in my cut, and then when it comes time to maintenance, I'm going to do way less cardio. That doesn't, again, is that mathematically a fine strategy? Absolutely. In practice, do I see that work out often? I don't. I think that it is just adds another layer of variability. When it comes time to actually go to maintenance, you now have to reduce the cardio and increase calories, and your risk of just messing something up in that regard is a little bit higher. I'd rather see you get to a place with your movement across the week, maybe it's 2 days of cardio and 8,000 to 10,000 steps, and say, you know what, this is something I can sustain for the long haul. It's good for my health. It helps with appetite regulation, all that good stuff. It obviously helps, from a calorie burn perspective, but it feels really sustainable for me for the long term. I'm not jacking it up to lose weight. I'm not lowering it when I go back to maintenance. That would be my advice. I would continue as is. You said your other thought was, or pull it out and add back as needed. I wouldn't pull it out. I think you're fine. The 2 days of cardio we have in our programming is one zone 2 day and one interval day. And I think you can absolutely handle that in a cut for sure. Next question. I have strength trained for several years, but just hit menopause and my joints, especially knees, are so sore that it makes things like squatting, etc., painful. It's frustrating as I know I can lift more than my joints allow. I feel so disheartened. Have you experienced this with clients and any suggestions? I would highly, highly, highly recommend getting your form checked, making sure that you're doing things in an appropriate manner. I will sympathize that this is like, hey, having joint discomfort that feels like it comes out of nowhere is frustrating for sure. Absolutely. But I will just say, when I read this question, I think this is something you can absolutely manage. I think whether that's making sure you're doing things with perfect technique and tempo, and perfect technique is a bit of an oxymoron, but just making sure you're not doing anything egregious from a technique perspective, making sure that you're tempo is good, that you're not bouncing out of the bottom, making sure that maybe you just need to lower a set. Maybe you're like, hey, I'm doing 3 sets of hack squat, 3 sets of leg press, 3 sets of split squats. And it's like, okay, maybe that's just like a lot of pressure on your knees, or pressure. Maybe it's just a lot of stress on the knees. And, in the old days, maybe you were handling it just fine. And these days it feels like a lot, our recovery capacity goes down as we age. And so that might be like, hey, maybe I drop a set from some of these knee dominant movements, and maybe that just works itself out. So I would take a look at how you're doing it. I would take a look at how much you're doing, and those would be the 2 things that I would look at first. I would look at how much, in this case, knee dominant stuff you're doing, how much squatting, split squatting, lunging, leg pressing. And then I would look at how you're doing it. And I would make sure you're doing not more than you can recover from, and you're doing it in a way that, biomechanically, doesn't put your knees into, these are hard things to say because there are no objective things like perfect technique or perfect tempo. There aren't things like that, but generally speaking, controlling the weight, generally speaking, not bouncing out of the bottom, generally speaking, not doing too much too fast in terms of range of motion. And so have I experienced this with clients? Absolutely. I would get your form checked, and I would experiment with slightly lower volumes on some of the knee dominant stuff, or maybe slightly further from failure. You could say, I do 3 sets, but normally I take them all to failure. I, go to 1 RIR, maybe 2 or 3 RIR on those movements gets you nearly the same stimulus without the stress. I like keeping the intensity pretty high and reducing sets just because it's also getting you your time back. And so instead of doing 3 sets with 3 RIR, could you do, 2 sets with 1 RIR? And if that gave you relief, it also gives you time back. So that's what I would do. Next question. Do I need to worry about the increased risk of cancer if I'm eating boar's head deli meat, chicken, every day, about 2 to 3 ounces? So yeah, there's a link between processed meats and cancer for sure. But I would say, what is the likely cause of that association? I would say the sodium and the nitrates. And so if you're getting nitrate-free deli meat and your overall sodium and blood pressure in check, I would feel pretty confident with this. I think a lot of times it's the curing and the addition of a lot of salt. So basically sodium and nitrates that, again, we don't have like the most amazing, unbelievable research to declare what I'm saying as 100% the cause. But the thought is that, hey, it's most likely from the fact that these meats are really, really high in sodium, and the average American's already having too much sodium, and they're higher in nitrates, which aren't great. And so do I think if you're eating 2 to 3 ounces of boar's head chicken every day, I don't think that matters at all, frankly, in the context of your overall diet. I don't think that that's a lot of additional sodium. I would, just because I would want to cover my bases here. I'd say, hey, take a peek, make sure your blood pressure's in check, make sure your, blood pressure is probably a good marker of, am I having too much salt? And so I would look at blood pressure, even buying a blood pressure cuff for at home. But dude, 2 to 3 ounces of boar's head chicken every day, like, you're good, man. Like, seriously, like, that's like, I can't imagine that that's a straw that breaks any camel's back in terms of health or cancer risk. If you were like, hey, I have, boar's head deli meat, and I have an assortment of different deli meats. Some of them are more cured. Some of them have nitrates in them. Some of them have way more salt in them. And I have that multiple times per day, every day. It's like a primary source of protein for me. Like, yeah, maybe. It's also some of them, depending on what meat we're talking about, it's high in saturated fat as well. And so, of course, chicken is not. And so I don't think you have anything to worry about. I would make sure that I'm getting my your blood pressure checked regularly. But to be honest, 2 to 3 ounces of chicken every day, you're good, man. Next question. If I'm in maintenance trying to build muscle, will calorie cycling on the weekdays also my lift days and higher calorie on weekends affect my days? Wow, we got to reread this one here. I'm in maintenance trying to build muscle. Calorie cycling on the weekends, also my lift days, and higher calorie on the weekends affect my gains. So I'm not exactly sure what type of calorie cycling you're doing. That was a little convoluted there. But if you're in maintenance trying to build muscle, the first thing I'm going to say to you is that is going to happen really, really slowly unless you're new to training. I would not expect big results unless you're looking at it like year to year. I'm not saying trying to build muscle in maintenance is an oxymoron. It definitely is not. You can absolutely build muscle in maintenance. If you want to learn more about that, I have a podcast on body recomposition. It's absolutely possible, but I would just say like, you're like, I'm in maintenance trying to build muscle. It's like, well, just know that happens really slowly to begin with. Now, if you calorie cycle and you have some days where you're in a deficit and some days that you're in a surplus, right, and your net is maintenance, I think you're going to be fine. Is there an intellectual discussion here? Maybe, but I think whatever the catabolic effects of being in a deficit are a couple days a week is probably, evened out by the anabolic benefits of spending a couple days in a surplus. And so I really think that you have nothing to worry about. If you're at maintenance and you calorie cycle and you have some higher days, some lower days, you're going to get the same results as if you ate every single day the same, barring potentially a really, really, really extreme example, just to cover my bases here, cover my back, where like, what if you had all 7 days of calories in one day and then fasted for 6 days? Yes, in very extreme scenarios, I bet you it impacts muscle growth. I think there was just a study on alternate day fasting versus continuous energy restriction on lean body mass retention. So people doing an alternate day fasting approach. I think it was in Alan Aragon's review recently, and they saw no difference in the loss in lean body mass, even with people that were doing alternate day fasting, which is like a very extreme form of calorie cycling. So that, and again, that's in a deficit, but the idea that it's very similar might span across all phases. So I don't think you have anything to worry about, especially because most people are doing this in a fairly moderate way, where it's like, a couple hundred calories less a couple days a week, a couple hundred calories more a couple days of the week. I think you're going to be just fine. Next question. Loving cluster sets for pull-ups. Are they a good strategy for any exercise, say push-ups? They are one of the hardest exercises that are so hard for me to progress in. Yes, absolutely. Totally. We've done cluster sets for lateral raises because sometimes just getting people to grab a heavier dumbbell can be helpful. Of course, it can be helpful physiologically to help you build strength, but also just, gosh, man, you progress on lateral raises in terms of weight like once a year. So sometimes it's nice to do it on those as well. But if you're working on getting your first chin up, we've been doing cluster set chin ups in our program this past cycle. We're going to do them again the next cycle. I just posted about them on Instagram. If you don't know what they are, I think they're one of the top tools in your toolkit. If you're looking to get your first chin up, they're definitely not even if you're just trying to get your first chin up, if you're trying to get more chin ups, if you're trying to, do more weighted chin ups, I think cluster sets are awesome. And I think for push-ups, they're incredible. I do think that, people have an emotional attachment to being able to move their own body weight in a push-up or a pull-up. And so if you're trying to get your first pull-up or push-up as a way of just being like, fuck yeah, like I can do this thing, I think that they are amazing. I love cluster sets for push-ups. And we might even have done that. That's not English. It's possible we've done those already. But I think it's totally logical. So I see where your brain is working. You're like, hey, I can do this also for push-ups as a way of getting stronger at push-ups to either get my first push-up or more push-ups or weighted push-ups, whatever. Absolutely, it works the same way. So good insight. Next question. Ended my cut around 127, then slowly reversed to try and find maintenance. Continued to lose until 116-ish and have added back 700 calories now. I heard you won't maintain the same scale weight if at maintenance. Do you think I could add another 100 and 200 calories and maintain on that, knowing I may gain 1 to 3 pounds from food volume? I have no idea. And it's not that I necessarily have no idea, but the truth is it doesn't matter what I think, because there's so many moving parts to this question of what you were doing while you were cutting, how was your tracking habits, how meticulous were you tracking? How meticulously were you tracking during this increase of 700 calories? I mean, if you added 700 calories and you continued to lose weight, that speaks to, maybe you were in a huge deficit to start. Maybe you towards the end of your cut weren't really eating what you thought you were eating, and then you got really meticulous during the reverse process. The truth is, I have no idea if you can add 100 and 200 calories and maintain on that. I have no idea. And my point is nobody knows. Hey, if I do X to my calories, what's going to happen to my weight? Nobody knows. You could try and check and do a little experiment, which I think, again, if you're someone who's like, I really want to eat another 100 and 200 calories and I might gain a pound or 2 or 3 or 4, but it's worth figuring that out because I'm really still hungry. Great. I think you should absolutely do it. So only you can decide if that experiment bears fruit or if it's worth it to you. So I have no idea. If you decide to do it, I would give it, a month at least to decide what's going on. You might see an initial spike. You might see no spike at all in the beginning, but then a gradual weight increase. I would give it at least a month before you decide, you make a declaration about what is or isn't happening. Next question. I have irritated my sciatica nerve doing belted squats. It makes me feel a little sore, but luckily nothing more serious. I've stopped doing those squats, but I can carry on lifting as long as I'm careful and listen to my body, ? Yeah, totally. If you no longer have pain, then I think you're just fine. Yeah, there's a lot here. Trying to dissect pain, why you have it, what to do about it on an Instagram Q&A in a podcast without talking to you, seeing you lift, looking at your programming, looking at your technique, all that stuff. It's incredibly hard to do. If you've stopped doing those, the pain has gone away and you can do other squat patterns. You can do lunges and leg presses and back squats or foam roller hack squat, landmine hack squat. I mean, if you can do a lot of that stuff and you don't have pain, no problem. I mean, the belt squat's cool and all, but it's certainly not like a thing that you'll miss a ton when it comes to results. So if you're like, hey, having that belt really tight around my waist kind of pinches in an area that doesn't feel great, but when I do other, squat patterns, I feel fine. Yeah, I would do other I would do other squat patterns and feel fine. That's what I would do. Next question. Are fartleks a good way to get some higher intensity work in for running? No specific race goals. So fartlek is a Swedish word that means run play or speed play. And essentially, I know it sounds funny in English, fartlek, but it's spelled Fartlek, fartlek. Essentially, a fartlek is like an auto-regulated interval workout where you are going to go out at an easy pace. Like a true fartlek is when I say auto-regulated, I mean like self-driven, where like you go out and you say, hey, I'm going to go out for an easy jog, but I'm going to speed up and I'm going to run faster. And when I start to feel like I'm getting a little tired, I'm going to go back to running slower. And when I feel really recovered and ready again to run fast, I'm going to run faster again. And then when I feel tired and I feel like I need to recover, I'm going to run slower again. And you do that, for a number of minutes or a number of miles. And that is a fartlek workout where it's called speed play because it's self-driven. It's like, hey, it's like playtime where I go faster when I feel like it. I go slower when I have to. And, keeping it within a relative level of difficulty, depending on what's prescribed to you as your coach. So I absolutely think it's a good way to get some higher intensity work in for running. I think having a zone 2 and a fartlek as tools in your back pocket for when you maybe don't want to do something mega structured, I think it's awesome. Knowing what it feels like to go out for a nice zone 2 ride on your bike or on the elliptical or Stairmaster or the rower, whatever, or for a run, whatever. And having a fartlek where you're like, hey, I'm going to do an interval session here, but I'm going to do it by feel. And I'm just going to go harder until I feel tired, and then I'll recover until I feel ready. That's, in a nutshell, what a fartlek is. It can be more structured than that. You can say, I've given clients fartleks where it's like, hey, I need you to complete over a 45-minute period 10 20-second surges. So I want you to run faster for 20 seconds 10 times over the course of these 45 minutes. You get to decide when you do that. So do 20 seconds fast, and then, go slow again until you feel ready for another 20-second surge. And I want you to do 10 of those. And so it can be structured, it can be unstructured, but I think it's an absolutely a good way to get some higher intensity work in for running. I love it. I love a good fartlek workout. Next question. How do you program pull-up negatives? Is there a certain rep range or is it an AMRAP? Yeah, there is. I like programming these in like the 4 to 7 rep range. And so basically eccentric only pull-ups. And we're doing them as an optional exercise in my next program, actually. I like programming it in the 4 to 7 rep range, focusing on a lot of quality, at least a 4-second eccentric before you even think about adding reps. Is there a certain rep range or is it an AMRAP? I mean, it's kind of an AMRAP, but the thing is, if you can do like 10, 11, 12 really slow negatives, that set is so freaking long. Think about it. If you're doing like a 6-second eccentric, doing 10 of those, the set could take you like 80 seconds between just the reset, jumping, the holding, the going down. And so that's a really, really long set. I'd rather people get to the point where they can do, 5, 6, 7 really, really, really good reps. And then I'd rather see somebody add a little bit of weight and do weighted eccentrics. I think that's a more productive use of each of your minutes you spend training. Next question. I only have 3 days to dedicate to cardio. Is this enough? They have to be longer to meet the physical activity guidelines. 3 days, absolutely enough. P.S. The physical activity guidelines are 150 minutes of low intensity cardio or 75 minutes of higher intensity cardio or a mix of both. 3 days of cardio, first of all, you can absolutely hit the 50. You could do 3 50-minute zone 2 sessions and you would hit the physical activity guidelines. I think that that's feasible. You could say 3 45 minutes for sure. Or you could do 2 zone 2 days, 2 lower intensity days, maybe 2 45-minute sessions that gets you to 90 minutes, and then 1 interval session. And I think that would be, in combination, meeting the physical activity guidelines. I think you could do 2 interval days, and you could get the interval days done in, 25 to 35 minutes. I think you could do 2 of those and a zone 2 session. And to me, that would together match or meet the physical activity guidelines. I think you could do 3 interval sessions if appropriately structured and meet the physical activity guidelines. So I think 3 cardio days, if structured appropriately, a mix of higher intensity and lower intensity, you're checking the physical activity guideline box. You are crushing it. Dude, 3 days of cardio is incredible. Incredible. And just remember, it's not only is it a spectrum, but there's a diminishing return. So even if you're like, hey, I only have 2 cardio sessions, I'm not, should I be worried that I can't meet the physical activity guidelines? First of all, you could if you did 2 times 35, 37 and a half minute interval sessions, right? You'd get to 75 minutes. But, you don't have to meet the physical activity guidelines before you start seeing benefit. I mean, you start seeing benefit from doing anything at all. And not only that, but there's a diminishing return. So doing 1 day, you get the maximum benefit. You get the most benefit of any single workout. Doing a second day is better, but not double as good. Doing a third day is better, but not 3 times as good. And so there's a diminishing return. So even if you only have 2 days, 2 days is incredible. You probably get, 80% of the benefits of meeting physical activity guidelines, which is incredible. Really, really awesome. So 3 days to dedicate to cardio is plenty for again, we don't know specific percentages here, but I would go as far as to say is 90% of the available health benefits of doing cardio if you do them intentionally. Next question. I'm in your group program, but I just joined the LISS method because I want to train for a half and then a full marathon next year. Best to drop the 3-day program. I wouldn't. First of all, Alyssa Olenek, incredible, super smart in the hybrid training space, super great, running coach. Absolutely, you're going to love it. That's awesome. I'm not sure if she also gives lifts. I have a sneaky suspicion that that my program might be, how would I put this? I think Liz, I love Liz, by the way. I love this. I would say this to her face, that her program's probably a little bit more like CrossFit home gym workout of approach, a little bit less like machines and cables and and free weights and hypertrophy and stuff like that. So depends. Do I think at face value, you can do my 3-day program and train for a half and a full marathon? Absolutely. 100%. I think you can do that. But I don't know how many days you have available to train. You might only have 5 days to train. You're like, well, I can't do 3 days of lifting and 2 days of running and, really effectively train for a marathon. Then I would do a 2-day program and do 3 days of running. But I would not stop running. I would not stop lifting. So I don't, if LISS gives workouts, please do them. So I would not stop lifting and just start running. I would not want to see that happen. I don't want you to lose muscle mass in this process. Plus, the lifting is going to make you a better runner. You'll recover more, just have more speed and power. And, people think you don't need that for marathon training. You still do. So if you could train 7 times a week, I would stay with 3 days of programming. If you could train 6 days a week, I would still stay with 3 days of lifting and 3 days of running. But once you could train only 5 days, I would go 3 days of running, 2 days of lifting. And as I got closer to the marathon, I might go to 4 days of running and 1 day of lifting as we got closer. And if you wanted to stay in my program and change it to a 2-day per week program, all you would do is you would take 2 exercises from day 1, 3 exercises from day 2, and create your own full body day. And then we provide a full body day at the end of the week, which is a combination of days 3 and 4. So those would be your 2 days per week. But, to be fair, whatever Alyssa writes, I think is really, really great. And I'm sure you would do awesome. I just make sure, I don't want you to stop lifting, whatever you do. I don't care if it's in my group or Alyssa's group, don't stop lifting. And if you can train 6 days a week for this, for everything all together, I would still lift 3 days a week if you want to continue to get stronger simultaneously. But I could see 4 and 2 being also a really great strategy. And if you want to do 2 days a week with my program, you absolutely can. Let's do a couple more of these here. Next question. I'm wanting to get all my questions into one box. I'm looking for a recommendation for a quad hamstring machine for home gym, cables. I have a squat rack, limited on space. So if you're in my community app, I have a list of home gym equipment with links to everything that I really love. I would look at the Xmark leg extension ham curl machine. I think it is actually at the price point, it's unbelievable. It's like $700. I know that can either be a lot or a little depending on what your budget is, but it is an end game machine, meaning like it's the only leg extension ham curl you'll ever need. It's fantastic. As far as cables go, if you're limited on space, I might look if the company that sells your squat rack sells cable attachments for the squat rack, just so you don't have to add more space. Otherwise, I might look into, there are these attachments. I know Coach Kasim just bought one. They're expensive as shit, but basically it's a cable that you can attach to your squat rack, and it works for it's not like a brand specific one. I know that it can fit a lot of racks. For cables, I would go look at Rep Fitness. I think Rep Fitness and Titan both make, and Xmark. Rep Fitness, Titan, and Xmark all make functional trainers in the $2,000 range, which is like, in my opinion, the lowest I would go and buy a functional trainer. There are some that are like, whatever. There are some in like the 1,500 space, 1,200, 1,500, and they're fine. I think going up to 2,000 does get you a little bit more quality. Some features like the weights start a little bit lower, which can be really nice. So that's what I would do. I would look at the Xmark leg extension ham curl. I would look at Rep Fitness, Titan, and Xmark for cables, and I would look at their cheaper models in the $2,000 range. You have a squat rack, limited on space, and I hope if you have space for those two machines, if you have a squat rack, cables, leg extension, ham curl, you're friggin' set, dude. Next question: do you incorporate a nutrition component into your training groups? Not at this time. The truth is, I want to. The truth is, I want there to be a nutrition coaching, but the more I do one-on-one coaching, which I've been doing for like a decade, the more I think, man, a group setting can be nice for sure, but there's from nutrition is just more complicated than training. The way I run my group program from a training perspective, I have so much confidence in being able to articulate, how people should go about training and answering questions and watching form videos. But nutrition is way more complicated, in my opinion. It has way more to do with like an individual's psychology, relationship with food, behavior change. And so I think I can do a decent job at it, but a part of me is resisting it in the sense that I guess I have a gut feeling that people really need more than that. I think group training makes a lot of sense because there isn't as much intricate psychology when it comes to lifting and exercise in general. Food is way more complicated. Our relationship with food is more complicated. And so I've been a bit resistant. And I just think most people that I can't help this. A question asker, I love you. I thank you for asking this question. I don't mean this in a way that it might sound, but I can't help but think that a person asking this question probably needs one-on-one help. Now, what I will say is one-on-one's expensive. It's certainly not cost. It's certainly not like super cost inclusive where everyone can afford it. I get that. So actually, let me come back down a little bit because I do think that something's better than nothing. And if you're like, hey, I don't have hundreds of dollars a month for a coach, but I do have $100, $40, $60, $30 for some group nutrition coaching, and that's going to help me do some good. Then okay, actually, I will change my tone on that a little bit. I think that that's good. You know what? I got to tell you, I really want to add a nutrition component. That's been a thing that basically I started my Mighty Networks. I'll let you guys in on a secret. I love Mighty Networks, by the way. I'm having so much fun with our community. It's awesome. The free content, the resources, the articles, is just like so much good stuff in there. But one of the things it does allow me to do is also have nutrition coaching under one roof. And that is part of the reason that I moved over to Mighty Networks. But I've just been dragging my feet on, I guess I just really want to do a good job with nutrition coaching and make sure that it's really, really helpful. And I want to make sure that it's meaningful, that people actually like learn principles around eating and learn, to work on their relationship with food and body image and some of the stuff that I think just goes beyond like giving you a calorie and macro sheet and how to set up a cut and how to reverse diet and, all of those things that I think are kind of what people think of when they think of group nutrition coaching. But I just would want to do a really great job in the same way we do with the group training. I don't want it to be, and by the way, I'm not saying other people are doing this. I don't want it to be, here's your macros, here's a data sheet, and here's how I would set up a cut. I'll see you later. I want there to be a lot of learning that goes on, because that's what I think really makes a difference long-term. So it's something I will tell you right now. It's something I will absolutely do in my career. I'm not sure when. I have some other things I got to do first. Next question. How do you get over / accept the fact that goals take time and it's a long haul and continuous effort versus wanting something in the short term with quick fixes? It's mind-boggling sometimes seeing people's journey has taken 4 years, and honestly, that's a little overwhelming. First of all, I think it's important to internalize what you're saying, which is that real change takes time. And I think it's important to understand what sorts of changes have what cost, right? So if you want to have a dramatic physique change, that doesn't happen in 6 months. Probably doesn't happen in a year. But in the same breath, I think people can see change that they're happy about in 6 months, 6 months, a year. I think you can get the type of results that you're very proud of in that time. Having crazy transformations absolutely takes years. I don't know. Maybe this is me getting into my old age, but this is why you need a stronger reason for doing something other than I just want to look different. Because looking different takes a really long time. And if that's the thing that you're really looking for in terms of motivation to help you metaphorically get out of bed every day to get it done, it's not going to last. You need to be thinking a bit deeper about the reason why you're exercising, the reason why you're improving your nutrition. Things like improving my health and longevity, my quality of life, my joint health, my cognition, my sleep, my energy throughout the day, my blood work. You need to layer on the health aspect, because you just won't make it if you're waking up every day hoping to look different in the mirror. It won't last. That isn't enough motivation to make big changes in your life and sustain them for years. And so I would really get behind other things that are going to improve, which basically everything from a quality of life perspective, when it comes to getting healthier. And I would make sure that that's my primary focus, or at the very least of equal importance. I think if you're embarking on exercise with the sole focus on looking different, it's possible, man. People have done that. Of course, people have hey, man, I was fat and out of shape, and all I wanted to do was look good, and that really fueled me for the next year, and I changed my life. Do those stories exist? 100%. But a happier and more likely to be successful route is probably really focusing on all the other good stuff that's happening and having aesthetics be a bit of a cherry on top. I'm not poo-pooing aesthetic goals. I think aesthetic goals are fine. At face value, there's nothing wrong with wanting to look at it a certain way. But I just think, how do I accept the fact that goals take time? I make sure that I'm focused on something else other than just achieving that single goal of looking different, that I'm excited about getting stronger, that I set intermittent goals in terms of performance, that I, get my blood work checked, and I get really, in the last couple of 6 months, I've had a lot of clients, new clients, that maybe don't really feel like they're doing such a great job. They're kind of hung up on maybe they haven't lost weight in a bit, or they haven't gotten stronger in a bit. And then they hire me because they're like, hey, I've been kind of stuck. And then I'm like, hey, have you gotten any blood work done lately? Maybe we get some blood work done. And I'm like, dude, you're healthy as shit. You're killing it. Have you not given yourself props for how well you've done? Look at your cholesterol. It's down 40 points. Look at your A1C. It's in a normal range. Look at these other markers that used to be, that are trending in a positive direction. Have you not been getting excited about this? So I would make sure to attach my motivation and reason for doing something to something a smidge deeper than just looking different. It can be on the list, of why you want to do something for aesthetics. It can totally be on the list, but if it's the only thing, I don't know if most people can kind of, I don't want to phrase it this way, but hate their body into crazy transformations. It usually needs to be about something different if you're going to sustain something for many years. Next question. My kids are older and I have more time to devote to myself and exercise. I've been doing your workout since March, plus cardio. My goal is to be more muscular and heart health. So basically, I want to look good. I have an hour at least to work out per day. Would more volume be the best choice for me? Not if you're doing my program. If you're doing my program all 4 days and you feel like, I will promise I will add some nuance to this. I'm going to say it in a way that sounds kind of dismissive, and then just because I think it's important to hear, and then I will come back to it. So the truth is, if you're doing my program as it's written 4 days a week, and you have the energy to do more training such that you're yearning for it and asking for it, I would really question the intensity with which you're training. Sometimes, I got to tell you, I just wrote the next program, and sometimes I look at those workouts and I think I would not survive this workout. Like, with the intensity that I want you to train with, I would not survive this workout. Sometimes I look at it and I'm like, yeah, man, I would. I sometimes I'm torn because I think the workouts are too hard sometimes. And then there are people that are like, hey, it's really low volume. And I'm like, well, not if you get close to failure, it's not. Not if you train hard, it's not. And so I'm not coming at you. I don't know what your, training intensity is like. And by the way, is it possible that you train with a lot of intensity and you still have time and effort for a little bit more? It's possible. It's possible. But even if you were doing everything absolutely perfectly, training intensity wise, I think you've gotten like 95% of the muscle building and strength benefits by doing my program that are available to you. So I would if you were like, hey, I have extra time during other days potentially, I wouldn't add more lifting. I'd add more cardio. Until you're doing like 4 days of each, I would add lifting and cardio. If you're like, I'm doing 4 days of cardio and 4 days of lifting, now I have extra time and energy, which is an oxymoron. Like, most people don't have extra time and energy after doing 8 sessions a week. Then I would be like, okay, maybe there's plyometrics that you could do. Maybe there's mobility you could do. Maybe you're better off spending that time meditating and doing mindfulness stuff, like, or playing a sport. I just don't think if you're doing my program plus cardio, or let's say you're doing my program for lifting, I don't think your extra time should be spent on more lifting if you want to be muscular and healthy. I think you should spend it doing either more cardio or playing a sport or going for a hike in nature, or just, I can think of a plethora of different things I'd rather you do. We only have 4 questions. Let me get through these. Are there any health benefits from a sauna, or just do it if you like it? There are health benefits of a sauna. Absolutely. The problem is twofold. You have to do a lot of sauna to get the benefit. And a lot of the benefits of sauna overlap with the benefits of exercise. And exercise is better than the sauna. So kind of referring back to my previous question, let's say you're doing 4 times a week cardio, 4 times a week lifting, and you have extra time and you want to sit in the sauna. Okay, no problem. But every minute you're spending in the sauna, I would recommend you do cardio. So like if you're not in really good cardiovascular shape, I don't recommend going to the sauna. I would rather you do cardio. It's the sauna, but better. Now, in my opinion, the biggest benefit so let's say you don't have, like, a lot of these studies are like sauna every day for 30 to 60 minutes, and then they see some benefit. It's like nobody has that time. But let's say you have a couple times a week. You have a sauna in your house. You really like it. The biggest benefit, in my opinion, is you get somewhat of a meditative effect where you're relaxing, right? You probably don't have your cell phone, hopefully. You're relaxing. You get to sit with your own thoughts. It's calm. There's no stimuli. So I think of it more as the same way I think of massage. Massage does not have any benefit physiologically. It just doesn't. The biggest benefit of massage is it's an hour where you don't have your friggin' phone. You're not on social media. You're listening to calming music. You're getting a parasympathetic effect. And so that's where I see the benefit of the sauna most practically. Next question. I'm turning 60 in December and I'm postmenopausal. How much more difficult is it going to be to lose 60 pounds and put on muscle? It depends. Here's what we know. That around 60 years old, post-menopausal, there's probably a reduction in resting metabolic rate you've probably begun the decline in metabolism. However, it's like 1% per year or something like that. It's really slow. Of course, it's slow over 30 years, definitely adds up. But it'll probably be a little bit harder calorie-wise. Maybe you'll feel like you can't eat as much as you used to, but it'll only be by a tiny bit, if at all. I think I've worked with plenty of people in this age bracket, postmenopausal, don't notice much of a difference calorie-wise. Maybe don't notice any difference. And if you've never lifted weights before, you're going to grow muscle really fast. Like, just because you're a little older, postmenopause, you're 60, dude, we have people in their 60s, 70s, 80s building muscle. So it's certainly not the case that you should go into this pessimistic. But if you've been lifting for the last decade and you're like, well, now I'm 60, is it going to slow down? I mean, it's always slowing down. So if you're like getting into lifting right now, I would be very optimistic with the amount of muscle and strength you can gain. And it's impossible to put a number on it, but I would just classify it as meaningful. You can build meaningful muscle at any age if you haven't been lifting, for sure. So how much more difficult is it going to be to lose 20 pounds? Not that much more difficult, if more difficult at all. Now, I want to be very clear. I'm speaking physiologically. There are things that change about someone's life. I know you're postmenopausal, which makes this a little less complicated than if you're premenopausal, perimenopausal, and the symptoms are potentially a whole lot more like disrupting in terms of life. But I don't want to be dismissive of this time in life, but at face value, physiologically speaking, the answer to both of your questions is not much more difficult at all. A little bit, but not much more. Not in any insurmountable way. Not in any way that is actually stopping you from achieving these goals. And so you should feel empowered that you can do both of these things. Next question. I said 30 minutes. We're on friggin' 46 minutes here. Due to sore knees, I'm not able to get very low with weighted back squats anymore. Oddly, lunges and Bulgarian split squats are fine. I've swapped for box squats, which means I can still go heavy, but without pain. Still beneficial or waste of time? It's absolutely still beneficial. But if you can get more knee flexion in a lunge and a Bulgarian split squat, I might lean more heavily on those. But if you really like doing bilateral back squats and you're like, hey, a box squat is just a more comfortable range of motion for me right now, you can absolutely do that. You could reverse band a little bit. So you could attach, let's say, a band, or you could do chains. You could use what's called accommodating resistance, where the lower you go into a squat, the lighter the weight becomes, just to encourage you to get a little bit deeper into an amount of knee flexion that, maybe can't handle the full weight that you're moving, but can handle a percentage of it. So you could reverse band your back squat, attaching bands to let's say, whatever, you'd have to use it to the ceiling. You could band it from the bottom up, but I wouldn't do that. You could use chains, which not everyone has. So you could still box squat, absolutely. But I would just say, you know what, maybe lunges and split squats are a better opportunity for us to really work on our knee health, and obviously grow your quads, because bending the knee more helps lengthen the quads. And so I think it's not a waste of time. Now, listen, it could be a waste of time if your box is really high and you're like barely bending the knee. You know what I mean? Like if you're getting to like your femur is parallel and you're sitting on a box at that depth, I think that's awesome. Where would I draw the line of, hey, this isn't productive anymore? I can't say for sure. But if your range of motion is really small, then yeah, maybe that's not the best use of your time, let's say. All right, last question. Thoughts on training fasted versus eating a little, half a banana and peanut butter, versus a full meal, pros and cons. Here's the deal. If your total calories and protein across the day are the same, I don't think you will ever notice a difference 10 years from now. You know what I mean? Like if you had that banana, if you eat the same amount of calories per day, same amount of protein per day, but one person trains fasted, the other person has 100, spends 100 or 200 calories pre-training, 10 years of doing the exact training, I think they're in exactly the same spot. Seriously, I don't think that this manifests in any meaningful way over the long term. What I would say is the only question you need to ask is, what do I think about this? First of all, I think training fasted is fine. It's a little different, totally. Especially if you're doing like intense cardio, it's going to be the most different. But if you're doing a 30 to 60 minute hypertrophy session, it's going to be the same. You're going to be fine. Essentially, the research we have on this shows that what you do habitually matters the most. So people who habitually train fasted will make adaptations such that training fasted has less of a downside. And if you train fed, so basically the only time we see a downside is when we take people who usually eat before training and then they don't eat before training. Those people, for a short period of time before adapting, usually perform a little bit less. The truth is, I don't think this matters at all. What I would do if I'm you is I would experiment with all of them. If you're like, hey, I train fasted and I feel great. Okay, then you're great. If you're like, hey, I train fasted and I don't feel so great, and then the next day I had that banana and peanut butter and wow, I felt amazing. Okay, then I might go that route. If you're like, well, I trained fasted and I didn't feel so great. I trained with the peanut butter and banana and I just felt the same. But, the next day I had a full breakfast. I waited 2-3 hours. Then I trained. Wow, I felt amazing. So I would want this to be completely individual decision-making here. This is like, there's no right or wrong. I train fasted I've trained fasted. I've trained after eating a little. I've trained with a full meal. To be honest with you, I don't notice much of a difference in any of those scenarios. Unless I'm doing a really long, hard interval session, I don't really feel a difference at all. I would do whatever's most convenient, and I would test these and see if there's a meaningful benefit to one or, any of these options. So hopefully that's helpful. Thank you guys for asking a question. I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Where Optimal Meets Practical. If you liked the episode, it would mean the world to me if you posted a screenshot to your social media or left a 5-star review on iTunes. That stuff really helps. If you ever want to get in touch with me, just shoot me a DM on Instagram @JordanLipsFitness. I'm always around to chat. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.